When this CEO called his security guard stupid, he had no idea the man spoke 11 languages and had worked for the United Nations. What happened next will shock you. Are you kidding me? I don't have time for this. Richard Sterling's voice echoed through the marble lobby of Sterling Tech. The 52-year-old CEO, dressed in his $3,000 suit, was red-faced with fury at the turnstile that refused to let him pass. David Floyd, the 45-year-old security guard, stepped forward calmly. "Sir, your badge expired yesterday. I can issue you a temporary—" "How hard can it be?" Richard interrupted, his voice dripping with contempt. "Even someone as stupid as you should be able to figure this out." The entire lobby froze. Employees stopped mid-stride, coffee cups halfway to their lips. Sarah Chen, a software engineer nearby, gasped audibly. David's face remained calm, but something flickered in his eyes. Years of being invisible, dismissed, overlooked, all crystallized in that one word, stupid. But Richard Sterling had no idea what he'd just unleashed, because this stupid security guard was about to teach him the most expensive lesson of his corporate career. What Richard didn't know was that David had already been the unsung hero of the morning, quietly handling situations that would have otherwise derailed the day's important meetings. Earlier, when the first delegation arrived, the Japanese executives for the afternoon's crucial meeting had approached David's desk, looking visibly confused. "Excuse me," Yamamoto-san had said hesitantly. "Conference room. Location?" Without missing a beat, David looked up and replied in perfect Japanese, "Yamamoto-san, the main conference room is on the 20th floor. The elevator's just around the corner." Yamamoto-san's eyes widened in surprise and delight. "Ah, you speak Japanese. Arigato gozaimasu." "Doitashimashite," David replied with a slight bow. The seamless interaction had set a positive tone for the visiting executives, but in the busy morning rush, no one from upper management had witnessed it. An hour later, the pattern repeated when a group of German engineers arrived, arguing loudly among themselves about directions. One of them approached David's desk with obvious frustration. "Entschuldigung," he said. "Wir suchen den Konferenzraum für das Sterling-Treffen." David smiled warmly and responded fluently. "Guten Morgen. Der Konferenzraum ist im 20. Stock. Ich kann Sie hinaufbegleiten, wenn Sie möchten." The Germans exchanged amazed glances. "Fantastisch. Vielen Dank." Soon after, the French delegation arrived, and once again, David smoothly transitioned into their language. "Bonjour. Vous cherchez la salle de conférence pour la réunion Sterling, n'est-ce pas?" "Mais oui. Votre français est excellent," the lead delegate exclaimed. Sarah Chen, who had been rushing past with her coffee during the French interaction, slowed down and stared at David with newfound curiosity. She lingered near the desk, clearly intrigued. "David," she whispered when the delegates had moved on, "how many languages do you actually speak?" David smiled modestly. "Just enough to help when needed." But Sarah was the only one paying attention to these remarkable displays of linguistic skill. The rest of the company continued their morning routines, oblivious to the extraordinary talent stationed at their front desk. Hours later, Richard finally stormed through the turnstile after David had quietly overridden the system for him. "See? Was that so hard?" he sneered before disappearing into the elevator, leaving David standing alone at his post. The lobby gradually returned to its normal buzz of activity, but the tension lingered. Employees exchanged sympathetic glances toward David, their expressions speaking volumes about how they felt witnessing their beloved security guard's public humiliation. Word of the incident spread quickly through the building like wildfire. By lunch, everyone knew. The CEO had just humiliated the one person who greeted them with a smile every morning and made them feel safe every night. But while gossip traveled through the office floors, Richard Sterling was about to discover that his morning outburst would have consequences far beyond a momentary loss of dignity. Back in his corner office, Richard was still seething from the turnstile incident. The encounter with David had left him feeling foolish, and Richard Sterling absolutely hated feeling foolish. In his mind, the solution was simple. Remove the source of his embarrassment. A security guard who can't even manage basic badge procedures, Richard muttered to himself, pacing behind his mahogany desk. How did we end up with someone so incompetent? He jabbed the intercom button. Get me Janet Morrison from HR now. When Janet arrived, Richard didn't waste time with pleasantries. I need David Floyd replaced immediately. Janet looked surprised. The security guard? What's the issue, Richard? He's clearly not qualified for the position. Took him forever to figure out a simple badge issue this morning. I need someone with actual intelligence handling our building security. Someone who can think on their feet, handle complex situations. Sir, David has an excellent record with no complaints. I don't care about his record, Richard cut her off. I need competence, not mediocrity. Replace him with someone who actually has the intellectual capacity for the job. Janet hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the directive. I'll start the process, but it'll take a few hours to arrange a replacement and handle the paperwork. Make it happen today. I want him gone before the afternoon meetings. What Richard didn't realize was that those afternoon meetings were about to become the most important and disastrous hours of his professional life. An hour later, the atmosphere in the lobby had shifted dramatically. David was quietly clearing out his desk while a hastily hired replacement security guard watched from nearby, looking overwhelmed and uncertain. Employees gathered in small clusters throughout the lobby, their whispered conversations creating a buzz of shock and disbelief. They're actually firing David? Sarah Chen asked, her voice filled with disbelief. The CEO ordered it personally, someone whispered back. Said he wasn't smart enough for the job. Smart enough? Another employee scoffed. David's the most helpful person in this building. Meanwhile, 20 floors above the brewing discontent, Richard was facing his own crisis. His regular professional interpreter had called in sick at the last minute, leaving him scrambling with a backup who was clearly struggling with the technical terminology needed for the international negotiations. The afternoon meetings were supposed to be Sterling Tech's crowning achievement, a series of complex international partnerships that would expand the company globally. Instead, Richard found himself watching his carefully planned presentations crumble. Mr. Sterling, Yamamoto-san said politely but firmly in the main conference room, perhaps we should postpone. The technical terminology is very important for our $15 million partnership. Richard's stomach dropped. This was the biggest international expansion in company history, and it was falling apart in real time. Give me 5 minutes, Richard said desperately, his confident CEO facade beginning to crack. I'll find someone better. But as he frantically called interpretation services from his office, getting only busy signals and no one available responses, his situation went from bad to worse. Richard's assistant burst into his office without knocking, something that would normally result in immediate termination. But the look of urgency on her face stopped him mid-dial. Sir, the German and French delegations just arrived early. They're downstairs asking for that security guard who helped them this morning. Richard looked up from his phone, confused. The security guard? What are you talking about? They said he spoke perfect German and French. They specifically want him to help with the technical discussions because they were so impressed with his professionalism this morning. Richard stared at her blankly, his mind struggling to process this information. That's impossible. He's just a security guard who can't even handle a badge scanner properly. Sir, they're very insistent. The German engineer said he was the most professional translator they'd encountered. They're refusing to proceed without him. A cold realization began creeping over Richard like ice water in his veins. Get David Floyd up here immediately. His assistant's face fell. Sir, we can't. You had him terminated an hour ago. He's already left the building. The phone slipped from Richard's hand as the full magnitude of his mistake hit him. But before he could fully absorb what he'd done, the international executives were about to make their position crystal clear. Richard rushed back to the conference room, his mind racing as he tried to formulate an explanation. But the moment he walked in, he could see that his carefully cultivated international relationships were hanging by a thread. Yamamoto-san stood up slowly, his expression grave. Stop, he said firmly. This is unacceptable. Where is the security gentleman from this morning? David-san? He's not available, Richard stammered, his usual commanding presence completely evaporated. Not available? The German engineer's frown deepened. He was the most professional translator we've encountered in years. We specifically request his participation in these negotiations. Richard felt sweat beginning to form on his brow. But he's just a security guard, he said weakly, the words sounding hollow even to himself. Security guard? The French delegate raised an eyebrow, his tone indicating Richard had just said something deeply offensive. That man has UN-level linguistic expertise. His cultural understanding and professional demeanor were exceptional. We insist on his participation. The room fell silent as Richard's face went white. UN-level expertise? The man he'd just fired for being not smart enough had UN-level expertise. Stories like David's remind us that everyone has hidden depths and untold experiences. If you're enjoying this tale of respect, dignity, and surprising revelations, hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring stories about the extraordinary people we encounter every day. Now let's see what happens when Richard realizes the full magnitude of his mistake. I'm afraid that's impossible, Richard began, but the French delegate cut him off. Then this meeting is impossible, he declared, standing up with finality. Richard watched in horror as his international executives and $15 million in partnerships began walking toward the door. Wait, Richard called out, his voice cracking with desperation. I can get him back. The executives paused at the door. Yamamoto-san turned slowly. You can? Then please do so immediately. We will not proceed without David-san's expertise. Richard ran from the conference room, his expensive shoes clicking frantically against the marble floors as he rushed to the lobby. He found David's replacement at the security desk, looking lost and overwhelmed by the electronic systems. Where's David Floyd? Richard demanded, breathing heavily. He was terminated, sir. Left about 20 minutes ago, the replacement stammered. Richard's blood ran cold. In his arrogance, he'd fired the one man who could save his company. With trembling fingers, he dialed David's number. David, it's Richard Sterling. I need you back immediately. The international executives are demanding you specifically. There was a pause on the other end. I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling, but I was just terminated. I'm currently in my car heading home. I'm not sure what you're referring to. I'm reinstating you. I'll triple your salary. Please, the entire deal depends on you. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before David's calm voice returned. I'll be there in 30 minutes. An hour later, David walked back into the Sterling Tech building to find a scene that took his breath away. The entire lobby had erupted in spontaneous applause. Employees had gathered from multiple floors to welcome back their beloved security guard, their faces beaming with genuine joy and relief. David, Sarah Chen called out from the crowd. We're so glad you're back. Others joined in with shouts of, We missed you. The outpouring of affection was overwhelming, and David felt tears prick at his eyes. He hadn't realized how much his quiet presence had meant to so many people. Richard met David at the security desk, his earlier arrogance completely stripped away and replaced by something David had never seen before: humility. David, Richard said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. How many languages do you actually speak? David looked at the man who had called him stupid just hours earlier. 11, sir. Richard's jaw dropped. 11 languages? How is that possible? I was a UN translator for 15 years, sir. I worked in Tokyo, Berlin, Paris, Mexico City, Sao Paulo, Mumbai, Cairo, Geneva, Brussels, New York, and Vienna. The lobby fell silent as employees processed this revelation. Richard felt the ground shift beneath him. UN translator? He whispered. But why are you working security here? David's voice remained steady, but Richard could hear the pain beneath the surface. My wife became ill 2 years ago. Stage 4 cancer. We needed immediate health insurance and to be close to her family here in the city. Sterling Tech offered both. Is she? Richard couldn't finish the question. She passed last year, sir. The silence stretched between them, Richard drowning in shame and regret, David standing with quiet dignity despite everything he'd endured. I called you stupid, Richard whispered, the words heavy with remorse. Yes, sir, you did. Richard took a deep breath. The executives are waiting upstairs. They refuse to proceed without you. I understand, sir. David entered the main conference room to find all 3 international delegations waiting expectantly. The moment he appeared, the entire atmosphere shifted. David-san, Yamamoto-san exclaimed in Japanese, his face lighting up with genuine pleasure. We are so pleased you have returned. The pleasure is entirely mine, Yamamoto-san, David replied in perfect Japanese, his slight bow showing deep respect for cultural protocol. The German engineer stood up immediately. David, we desperately need your expertise with the technical specifications. Our previous translator was struggling with the engineering terminology. Of course, David responded in flawless German, his accent so perfect that the Germans exchanged impressed glances. I'll be happy to help clarify any technical details. The French delegate smiled broadly. Nous avons insisté pour votre retour. We refuse to proceed without you. Merci beaucoup pour votre confiance, David replied smoothly, his French carrying the sophisticated tone of someone who had spent years in diplomatic circles. Richard watched in amazement from the corner of the room as David seamlessly facilitated the entire negotiation. But it wasn't just the languages that impressed him. It was David's intuitive understanding of cultural nuances, business etiquette, and diplomatic protocol. He didn't just translate words, he bridged worlds. When the German engineers discussed technical specifications, David didn't just convert the language, he explained the cultural context behind their engineering approaches. When the Japanese executives expressed concerns about timeline flexibility, David helped Richard understand that this wasn't just about schedules, but about face-saving and relationship building. For the French delegation's questions about market penetration, David facilitated not just linguistic translation, but cultural translation, helping both sides understand not just what was being said, but what was meant. Within 2 hours, what had started as a failing $15 million deal had not only been saved, it had been expanded to $25 million. The international executives were not just satisfied, they were enthusiastic about the partnership, specifically because of their confidence in David's ongoing involvement. As the delegations departed, each one made a point of personally thanking David and expressing their hope that he would be involved in future negotiations. Richard watched this with growing understanding of just how catastrophic his earlier decision had been. The next morning, Richard approached David's desk carrying a brass plaque and a folder of documents. His entire demeanor had changed. Gone was the imperious CEO, replaced by someone who had learned a profound lesson about respect and dignity. "David," he said, placing the plaque on the security desk where everyone could see it, "David Floyd, Security Supervisor and Chief International Cultural Consultant, fluent in 11 languages, UN Certified Translator. You'll be splitting your time between security and our international division," Richard continued, handing David the folder. "Your salary is being increased 5-fold, effective immediately. We're also establishing a new department, International Cultural Relations, and I'd like you to head it up." As employees gathered around, spontaneously applauding, Richard addressed the entire lobby with a humility that surprised everyone who knew him. "Yesterday, I called David stupid. Today, he saved our company and taught me the most valuable lesson of my career. I learned that respect isn't about position or title. It's about recognizing the incredible worth and dignity in every single person, regardless of their role." Later that day, Sarah Chen approached David during his break. 11 languages, UN translator, and you never mentioned any of it. Why? David smiled, the same modest smile he'd always worn. "You never asked. Besides, every job has dignity. I was proud." Hit that like button if you enjoyed this story and subscribe for more captivating stories.